Good afternoon. Welcome to another appalling episode of Diatribes from the voice of Deux. Now here's your aggravating and agitated host, voice of Deux. Good song. First class album. Masterpiece. Let it play, Mr. Producer. White Riot. So, gonna do another diatribe. Didn't really plan one out, but I gotta get one in just for my own personal vilification or validation. So I want to go on with What If Part 2 because I was doing some free-form ranting about what if this happened or the Goppers won and actually did something. What would it be like? What kind of world? But I left a lot of stuff out because I just put things in my head and hope it spews out correctly. And I forget stuff. So what if there were white riots? Oh boy, would the D's love that. And in a way, whites kind of, I hate to actually utter this out loud, but whites kind of have a right to riot. Because I've noticed in the last 6 months to a year that Jim Crow is coming back big time against Caucasoids. And you see it, and it's obvious, and everybody knows it. But to utter it out loud is not really allowed. A little uncomfortable talking about that. So there's going to be karmic retribution. The Caucasoids, if that's all they can do, and by they I mean the whole left cadre of people that have been oppressed all these years, if that's their revenge, then I think it's easy to put up with. But they'd love some white riots, wouldn't they? Oh God, would they love it. Just a bunch of white people with MAGA hats and orangey flags to where the guy is going to be held up as a nation unto his own. I can just see it happening. Oh boy, would the D's love that. Oh, somebody spit on the sidewalk, please, so we can round you all up and put you in prison. And everybody knows that too. Other what ifs, one will lead into the other. Now what if they decided to get Mayakas back up on the stand, put him in the docket and say, you're saying things that our eyes are saying differently. So let's try to reconcile those two things. The answers you've given to us is that the border is secure, everything's in order. And what people are seeing with their own eye, or two eyes, or half an eye, is people are just coming in at will, willy-nilly, anybody with anything. So let's see if we can get to the bottom of why that's happening and what's going on. So Mayakas is put in prison. That would be what we would do now. We're going to build the wall. We're not just going to build the wall, but we're going to build the wall like now, and it's going to take us about a week. Because all three states and the federal government are going to work together to build a wall. And people will not be able to come in except through certain channels, which will be vetting, checking exactly what they are, who they are, if they are a they or an ix or a vex, and find that out. And they will be put through the process of being allowed to come in. Build a wall. Then all these hundreds of thousands heading up with the cartel are going to have their noses pressed up against the wall, and it's going to be Mexico's problem, ain't it? And then Mexico's going to have to close off the border like they did years ago down at their southern border. And you're going to have a beautiful mess. Yeah, block them off. What if they did that? That'd be interesting. Now, say a few people did manage to crawl in the last 2 years. Somebody managed to sneak over the border with some sort of a nuclear device and blow up a city, whichever one they want. Now, what if that happened? What would people do? Say, well, that's just an isolated incident. Let's keep the border open. Or would they wait for more fentanyl to come in and see how many more people can be killed in their prime to alleviate this world population problem? Be interesting to see what if, when you talk about an attack, what if we had a calamity? What if there was a disaster, EMP, or a nuclear device going off and atomizing a city to smithereens? It's interesting to think what other people would do if, say, for instance, New York City was obliterated by an atom bomb. What would they do in Carson City, Nevada? Because it blows up that area, but we're still intact over here. Would we take a day off work? I remember when the buildings came down, I woke up in the morning, I usually turn on the radio, and I heard the plane crashed into the World Trade Center, and I'm thinking some small engine plane crashed into the building because the guy was an idiot. And when I turned on the TV set, I realized, no, this was a little bigger than that. And then I saw the buildings go down, and I go, this is going to be big, and this is going to change the world for the rest of our lives. And I was right. But I went to work that day, is the bottom line. It didn't stop me from having to go to work. I didn't know what, I was depressed. I didn't want to talk to anybody. People wanted to talk about the attack, and I just sat there. So I saw something like that coming long before it did. And, you know, people thought I was a fool, but a lot of people at work said, hey, you were kind of right, something was going to happen. But anybody could have said that. But there was not much work being done that day because we couldn't call to the East Coast. A lot of our distributors are out there. We really couldn't call anybody because the infrastructure kind of got fouled up. So we couldn't really put any calls through, and nobody was calling us, so we just sat there and did busy work and looked at each other like, yeah, the buildings came down. What are we going to do? And we were kind of still afraid. I was getting white powder in the mail, and I opened up a box and there was white powder all in it. I realized it was talc for this thing from UPS, for the whatever. And I was afraid, you know, it was more than just the buildings. But what would we do if there was a disaster? Would we just go on with life as usual? Probably start looting the grocery stores, or at least hoarding right away. People don't think ahead. And in the news, I heard that Orangey won his appeal to have a special master look at all the crap that they got out of the mansion. And so I hope it's a neutral party. It's very hard to find somebody like that. But somebody that goes through and says, you know, I don't know why you wanted all this stuff. Or if there is something secret, it's like, well, why does he have this? It's like, whatever. Get to the bottom of it. One of the chain of custody. So that was in the news. I'm glad they're getting a special master. I hope he or she or they are neutral. Another thing in the news I noticed, it was disconcerting, which will lead into more of my crap, is Russia's not doing badly. They're taking resources from other countries and other areas, and they're doing pretty good. They're weathering the sanctions that we were going to be strict, that we were going to put on them. Weathering that and actually sanctioning other areas that are going to have a cold and lonely winter. So Russia's doing good. They have an uneasy alliance between three countries that are economic powers. like 6 on the planet. There's what used to be the U.S., Australia, China, Russia, India, and the EU, or what will be the former EU. And China and India and Russia are kind of allied. Now, what would happen if they got into a monetary or financial alliance where they decide they're going to create a currency of their own to deal with all that pesky fossil fuels and all that other stuff that they sell? And since we don't want those fossil fuels anyway, it won't affect us one bit if they have their own currency. But just what if those 3 economic powers started their own currency? Not an economist, not an economist, but just in my theory, without really thinking about it, I would think it would make our currency kind of worthless, because we've already made it worthless through printing it out of whole cloth and just making it out of whole cloth to give anybody anything. Trillions of dollars in debt, which will never be paid, so forget that. Children and grandchildren are going to have to pay for what we're borrowing. Yeah, we're going to pay $30-40 trillion. What if crime was prosecuted instead of ignored? They had to build way more prisons. They had to have huge prisons that take up like towns, because they could investigate past crimes. It'd be funny if an Antifa guy who's kind of in college, he's gotten over all his angst from the riots, they'd get a knock on his door and they say, "We're arresting you for arson." What do you mean? Well, we have footage of you lighting a federal building on fire, so we're prosecuting you because the statute of limitations have not expired. That'd be cool. Be the look on. I love to see the look. And so if crime was prosecuted and they really wanted to investigate every last thing that's happened in the last 2 years, yeah, a lot of people are going to go to prison that thought they got away with it. And last but not least, and I saved the best for last, you've watched all my diatribes, of course, so you know that I've talked about hunger, I've talked about shortages, I've talked about mobs. And the one thing that mobs will finally rise up for is food. They will allow any political shenanigans to go on. They don't care how many 87,000 IRS agents have guns that are going to come to their homes soon. They don't care about criminals that run rampant. They don't care about an open border where they're bringing in drugs that could kill everybody in the country. But when the food runs out, then they will care. It's been shown throughout history. Empires have fallen because of food shortages. And that's the final straw that I will leave you with, is there's going to be food shortages. And if you dig just a little bit into the internet of what's going on, and I'm not saying the internet is the truth, I'm saying look for the information. They're trying to create food shortages. There will be food shortages from natural causes. There will be food shortages from war. And when those cupboards are bare in your local Safeway and Kroger's, everyone's going to have a cow, but they won't have a cow. No cows left. So I think that was a good one. I think I got a lot in there. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. Enjoy the rest of the day.